Isabelle, and 20 plus years ago or so, I left university, wasn't too quite ready for that experience, didn't kind of have my life ironed out. So I started working as a frontline customer service representative, thinking this is going to be short term. Next thing you know, we're 20 years later. So building my career from the ground up, I pretty much went from frontline customer service, everything in between up to the senior leadership ladder. But my passion always lies on the complexity that our frontline workers experience on a day-to-day. So every role that I did after that really was kind of a quarterback to help, one, simplify their experience, but also to elevate it. Because I think more often than not, they go unintentionally underappreciated and undervalued. So after 20 years in the industry, I decided to kind of take a chance on myself and basically, develop or build my own consulting business, which pretty much took place mid-January of this year. I'm also a mom, so I have 6 kids, 5 boys and 1 girl. They all range from 13 all the way to 22, and my little girl is 6 years old. So most of my children, 5 of them actually, also have diverse abilities. And I label that differently as the typical terms you hear, mental health or special needs or whatnot, because I think it unintentionally puts them in a light that is not always positive. So most of them have ADHD with a mix of also ODD, borderline personality, and schizophrenia. And my prior work, as much as I loved what I did, amazing people, ups and downs like anywhere else, unfortunately didn't necessarily give me quite the flexibility that I needed to be able to juggle both work life and then, of course, personal life. So that was kind of a second part into my decision to kind of breaking out on my own. But I still had the passion of Frontline. So I still wanted to continue doing work in partnership with corporations in order to really iron out those pain points that are preventing our frontline agents, representatives to doing their job. Because in the end, it's a detriment to the company, right? If you're frontline dealing with hurdles or things that are preventing them from serving our customers in an excellent manner, then obviously your business overall will suffer from that. So that's a bit in a nutshell my journey and how I landed where I'm at today. I know the consulting space, one, of course, gives me the flexibility I was talking about, but it also enables me to show up as myself, right? So not to dish the corporate reality, but there's expectations, and you navigate many different leaders that also have their own sets of expectations. So sometimes it removes a little bit of who you are, what you believe in, what your values are, and what your passions are. Because you kind of have to fit the mold to a certain extent to be able to succeed. So that was kind of my second, light bulb moment is I am who I am, and I don't want to change that. And this role enables me to match with people who are either like-minded or who appreciate diversity, different perspective and ways of showing up. So that's pretty much, I think, the main 2 reasons why consulting came into play. And I'm a problem solver. I've done it all my life. I've been, for whatever reason, obsessed with problems. And I also get obsessed with the fact that if there's no solution, I have to find one. And that's exactly the space that I'm playing in. There's never one day that looks the same. Ever, ever, ever. If anyone's slightly familiar, and I'll just use ADHD as an example, it's a neurodevelopment disorder where, it may show up differently depending on the person. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But typically, children will have trouble paying attention. Some may be overly active. Some may have, issues controlling their impulse thoughts and behaviors. So imagine a teenager, complexity is already there when you're a teenager, fitting in, your homework at school. If you're not doing well, then how do you overcome that? Like, there's so much that enters your life that you have to process. And as an ADHD child, you process it differently than most of us do. So every day is different. Like just last night, my son had a conundrum with a girl at school, and he didn't behave, as best as I hoped he would. And the way he was perceiving things and the way he was processing it was very different than probably someone without, that disorder. So you have to be quick on your feet. There's no time to just sit there and reflect, because your kids need help now. They're kind of looking at you, for guidance, and maybe you don't always have the answer in the moment, but by the next day, because I want my kids to learn to pause sometimes and just, think about it, and you come up with how you feel you could have handled that better. But even with that, reflection isn't always easy when a child has that disadvantage, right? So kind of have to come up and show up with different alternatives to help them think about the options. So in business, you know it all too well. Problems happen all the time, whether it's people, whether it's processes, whether it's systems. There's a variety of it. And we want things fixed yesterday, right? So I think that's where, and I'm not saying people without kids can't do that either, but for sure, my personal experience, I think it really brings that sense of you got to be quick on your feet, and you got to be able to think outside of the box, most often than not. So that's where I tend to raise the card. I literally have visuals, and it's like me time, right? And transparency is key. I'll be honest. I know we hear those buzzwords all the time, but in my life, it's a must. So if, for example, I want my kids to leave me alone, that is exactly how I approach it. Of course, I come with the why, right? There's nothing worse than leave me alone and then it ends there, and they'll just think about it in their own ways. So I like to make sure I follow with the why. Could be nothing to do with them. It could be just a long day. My brain is on overload and I just need to pause and relax and kind of recharge and reset. So it's important to kind of have those visuals to just say, you know what, unless the house is on fire, let's just really take the time, or I take the time that I need. And then it teaches them the same, right? And sometimes it comes and bites me back, because if I'm, looking to have a conversation because of something that happened and I want to have it now, and they're like, I need some me time. It's like, no, you don't. I want to talk about it now. So I guess it teaches me to respect their space as well. So. I think it all boils down to defining what success looks like for me, right? Because I can have 1,000 things to do in a run of a day. It could be important to other people, but until I actually did the exercise of, is it important to me? I was really getting overwhelmed, right? 24 hours is not enough in a day. And it's important to truly identify what is success for me. And then based on that, and I have 10 questions that I kind of use. They're my foundational questions, and I pivot them based on circumstances. But you really need to just figure out what you want, what you need to get there, and then everything out of that bubble. I'm not saying it's not important, but it may not necessarily be my priority. So looking inwards, as much as we hear that topic a lot, it's actually true, right? Because you can get so many different requests from so many different, partners or clients or family members. Like, it comes in every direction. And now I truly have to kind of own success for me have my 3 buckets, and I have them: family, passion, lifestyle. And of course, there's elements for each category. But what's coming my way, does it fit that? And if it doesn't, then I'm not saying I'm never going to touch it. I'm not saying I'm never going to support, but it's not going to be priority list. So that's kind of how I balance everything without driving myself bonkers in the process. Monday to Friday is kind of like my on-the-clock business days. And I'm not saying I don't do Saturday and Sunday, but it would have to be pretty, urgent for me to jump in on a Saturday and Sunday and do work. And that's because Monday to Friday, school days, right? My kids are typically in school. So it's my time to focus on business demands, business tasks, whatever you want to call it. Saturday, Sunday, my kids are off. So that's our time. I know it sounds simple, but you just have to stick to it. And for me, again, the success piece exists in business as well, right? So what's important for someone else to achieve may not necessarily be my goals and objectives. And that's where, am I a good fit for this partnership? Or maybe someone else would be a better fit, right? Like everybody, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think you just need to figure out your boundaries, your negotiables, your non-negotiables, and create that space. And when you start kind of falling outside of that line, then it's an opportunity to wheel back in and kind of reset and refocus. But you got to create that box that works for you. How far out are you willing to kind of step out of that box? And yeah, that could be completely different for me, completely different for you as well. And I think it's important to be upfront about that, right? So if a client approached me and said, I expect you to be on the clock 24/7. If I sent you an email Sunday night at midnight, you need to answer me. Right there, it's a trigger that we're not a match. We can still be friends. I'll help you find someone who fit that expectation. But for me, I'm in bed at 9 p.m. So I'm going to fail miserably. Full transparency, it was finding me. Working in corporate for 20 years, like I mentioned earlier, like it's easy to get lost in what you need to be molded into, right? So you kind of do things for the sake of doing it, so that check mark is there, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's truly aligned with what you want to achieve and do. So as much as difficult conversations sometimes have to happen, what's important to you may not necessarily be important to me. You gotta find a middle ground, right? And if you can't, then I think it's that parting ways discussion that needs to happen, and not in a negative way. Like that's not at all what I'm a picture I'm trying to paint. But at the same time, you need to be true to yourself. Boundaries, as always. I don't know if it's because I'm a mom, but boundaries is a key word for me. But from a business standpoint, I think it's important to understand what it is that you want to do, and find those people with similar adventures and visions. Because if not, I just think both are setting themselves up to fail. There's all kinds of fish in the pond, right? So you just got to find the one that helps elevate you, but also elevates them. And that's kind of how I approach life and business in general. Yeah, so it's basically the ability, the mindset shift in accepting that change is here to stay. So think about, years ago, like life cycles renewals for businesses. Like you could run your business, I think it was like there was studies done, don't quote me on the exact number, but it was around 75 years. You could do the same thing, not have to change anything in your business for 75 years, and things were great. In the era we're in now, you're now looking at anywhere from 1 to 3 years, depending on the industry that you're playing in, right? So reinvention for me is one, the reality that we're in. We want to fight change, that's fine, but I think it's a losing battle. Or leverage the uncomfortable and make it your strength, right? So reinvention to me is always looking at every component of your ecosystem, whether that's people, processes, whether that's the tools that you're using. And don't wait 5, 10, 15 years to evaluate if what you did yesterday is still beneficial today. So it's really getting in that mindset of continuous cycle of renewal, and getting rid of what no longer serves us. I struggled quite a bit, actually, from the age of 12, give or take, until my firstborn when I was 26. So about, 15, 16 years old. Change was hard, right? And back then we didn't necessarily have, my parents were very traditional, right? So you just got to do it that way because. Unfortunately, I wasn't that because kid. I was curious. I really wanted to know, well, why this way? Why not that way? So everything was very structured. We now live in a world where it's not so structured, and I don't think it's ever going to come back to this 1, 2, 3, 4 lifestyle, right? So, I think there was even a study done where they're now saying that generations after us are going to have at least 5 different careers in their lifespan. Not 5 jobs, 5 different careers. So knowing how things don't just happen overnight, right? You need, and I don't say work hard in a sense of get yourself sick over it, but you will need a plan, potentially education, college, university, maybe it's online courses or whatnot, but you will need to be able to adapt to everything that's coming your way. So for me, what I do in business, I knew nothing about marketing. Marketing research I did, but nothing about marketing myself and all the different, unique sales propositions, and I needed to learn to adapt how to do that as a consultant, right? So I want my kids to know that even if you're uncomfortable, that's okay, because most times when you're uncomfortable, it means there's something great in the end that's coming. I really want them to be versatile. I want them to, know that it's okay to fall down and come back up, because that's just life, right? I think sometimes we expect perfection too much, and it's not a reality. Nobody's perfect. I haven't met anyone yet that is, so. But I think my way, just to kind of wrap up that question, my way of showing, still at 41 years old, I'm taking courses. Still at 41 years old, I'm doing things that I'm not comfortable with, is the best way to model what I want them to do for their own sanity. If I had a choice to say, just stick in this box and not do anything else and just be content, that would be great, but that would set them up to fail in the long run. Find you and your passion, right? That's number one. What's your purpose? What are you looking to achieve? Really figure out you, not what everybody else is doing, you. Because there's so much information out there. There's so many different influencers. There's so many, things that you can steal, borrow, whatever you want to call it. But in the end, do you want to do what everybody else is doing? Or do you want to make something different and make it your own? So Simon Sinek's book, Finding Your Why, is truly, I'm not saying that's going to be, the magic solution for everybody. But for me, that book, and I'm not a reader, but I stepped outside of my comfort zone. I read it, and there's a set of activities and exercises that you can do both individually and as a team. So I focused on the individual part, and there's a lot I discovered that I think was dormant for the longest time. And where I thought I was going after doing that exercise totally pivoted my direction. So number one is figure out what that picture looks like. And then don't be scared to try things. Don't wait for things to all line up perfectly. Some people will tell you to do it that way. Some people will tell you to do it a different way. I think it's figuring out what's working for you. And just take your time, right? Like, don't try and handle everything all at once. Focus your first year on this is what I want to achieve, and then other things can wait for the second year and the third year. That's the beauty of being an entrepreneur, is things change all the time and you get to make it your own as you go through it, and you get to pivot and create new things. Just make sure that you really focus on embracing baby steps, so that way you can bring perfection, I know I shouldn't say perfection, but bring expertise maybe into those buckets first, and then grow from that. I think that's my advice. I didn't do it that way, so that's why I'm like, if I had to turn back in time, that's what I would have done instead of chasing other people's dreams. I didn't share much about like methodologies and all things, really work tools related, but anyone who was curious to know, like I said, the 10 questions I have, more than happy to send them your way, or people reach out. And same with kind of that framework I leverage to start putting people at the center of strategy and planning from an organizational perspective. Yeah, you know where to find me.